sharp, hot spotlight, and most people don't understand it, nor should they.
Elizabeth, as you know, Oprah sat down with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle in a very revealing interview last year. It made a lot of news.
Yeah, well, it aired last night, and it was filled with royal bombshells.
Yeah, did you watch it? I still need to tune into that.
No, I bet you.
Coronation. Do you think they should go? Do you think they should not go? Is it something you'd like to comment on? I'm listening.
Dominating the headlines. He's just wrapped up his trip to the UK and he's already planning another trip.
Alternate dimension, because apparently there are folks out there who want to take cooking advice from Meghan Markle. And as I told you before,
these Facebook messages, that little moment in time in my 20s was just consigned to history as far as.
This time, 2027, where will Harry and Meghan be?
Stripped of their titles.
She felt like she was in her own family. You know, her own family thought differently of her.
And that was my number one intention, was just clarity on why did you leave?
After being followed by paparazzi.
My biggest concern was history repeating itself, and I've said that before.
Bombshell interview in 2021 after the duo stepped away as working members of the royal family.
Of them, Harry, Meghan, and the two children. So indeed, now we've got that reconciliation. They're looking
more swagger and street cred than Meghan Markle ever will. I actually think Martha Stewart...
It was relevant to sort of show that you had actually known him and swapped numbers and what have you.
Yes, because
these teases of Project Thaw, the idea that Harry could be coming back to be a working member. Thank you for shaking your head no.
That is.
She says she felt unprotected, became suicidal, and was told she wasn't allowed.
March 2021, Buckingham Palace released 98 words, nothing more. The statement went out under Queen Elizabeth's name in response to the most damaging interview the monarchy had faced in a generation. And for years, the public assumed it came from the Queen herself, drafted by aides, approved by her, sent into the world. That's what everyone believed. According to royal author Valentine Low, that's not the whole story. The words that mattered most, the ones that would define how the world read this crisis, came from someone else entirely. Catherine, then Duchess of Cambridge, sitting on a sofa with her husband, arguing for one line to stay in. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. Here's what actually happened. According to the updated edition of Low's book, Courtiers, The Hidden Power Behind the Crown. 2 nights after Harry and Meghan sat across from Oprah Winfrey and described a family that had turned cold on them. Allegations of race, of mental health neglect, of a son written out of certain protections. The palace had to answer. Not with anger, not with silence either. Something in between. And getting that balance right meant almost nothing to the public who watched it unfold, but everything to the people inside those walls who had to live with the consequences. The first draft, according to a palace insider who spoke to Low, was mild, almost apologetic. It leaned toward what the source called the olive branch, the language that called Harry and Meghan much-loved members of the family, and left it there. Rise above it. Don't engage. That was the instinct of some in the building. William and Catherine disagreed. According to Low's sources, the couple sat together and pushed back on their officials directly. They wanted the statement toughened up. Not aggressive. The royal family doesn't do aggressive in public, but firm enough to signal that not everything said in that interview would be accepted as fact. That's when the real fight began. Because toughening up a statement from the monarchy isn't just about tone. Every word gets weighed for how it will be read in 10 years, in 20, in a history book someone hasn't written yet. According to Low, one of the officials working on early drafts was Jean-Christophe, William's private secretary. Other insiders credited the phrasing to Clive Alderton, another senior aide. Low himself doesn't settle it. Multiple sources gave him different names for who first put the words on paper. What isn't disputed, according to his reporting, is what happened once those words existed. A sentence surfaced. 5 words that would end up quoted in nearly every article written about the Sussexes for years afterward. Some recollections may vary. It was almost cut. According to the insider who spoke to Low, there was real concern inside the building that the phrase would provoke Harry and Meghan further. fears it would rile them at a moment when de-escalation seemed like the safer path. Some wanted it softened, some wanted it gone entirely. Catherine wanted it kept. The source told Low that she clearly made the point, and this is close to a direct account of what she said in that room, that history would judge the statement, and unless a phrase like it was included, everything Harry and Meghan had claimed would simply be accepted as true. No pushback. No record that the family saw it differently. Just silence standing in for agreement. That's the moment Low's book turns into something more than palace trivia. Because what it describes isn't a young royal reacting emotionally to a television interview. It's someone thinking deliberately about how this moment would read decades later, treating a 98-word statement less like a press release and more like a legal document, or a line in a history text. The insider went further. They told Low that Catherine does not get as much credit as she should for moments like this one, because she's subtle about it. Not performative, not visibly maneuvering. The insider's phrase was that she's playing the long game, always aware, according to this account, that she is on a path toward being queen consort one day, and that every decision made now becomes part of the permanent record she'll eventually have to answer for, or benefit from. Whether that reads as calculation or simply foresight probably depends on who you ask. Some royal commentators, when the book excerpts first circulated, framed it as evidence of a sharper political instinct than Catherine is usually given credit for in public life. Others pushed back, arguing that protecting the institution she's marrying into is exactly what any future queen consort should be doing. That this wasn't maneuvering, just competence under pressure. This wasn't the first time Catherine's instincts around public narrative had come up in Low's reporting, either. Years earlier, back in 2018, tabloids ran a story claiming Meghan had made Catherine cry during a dress fitting before the wedding. According to Low's book, the truth was closer to the reverse, and Meghan reportedly became fixated on getting the palace press office to correct the record. They didn't. Low writes that officials were equally adamant it would be a mistake to start briefing publicly about tension between family members, so the story stood uncorrected for years. Meghan referenced it herself in the Oprah interview, flipping the narrative back the other way in front of 60 million viewers. Put next to each other, these two moments start to look less like isolated incidents and more like a pattern. In 2018, the palace's instinct was to stay silent and let an inaccurate story run rather than risk fanning a family dispute in public. By 2021, with far higher stakes and international scrutiny, that same instinct toward restraint nearly won out again, until Catherine pushed the other way. Low's reporting doesn't say she was reacting to the dress-fitting episode directly, but the timeline is hard to ignore. Someone who had already watched one uncorrected story calcify into accepted fact for 3 years may have had good reason to insist. This time, that silence wasn't an option. There's a detail in Low's reporting that's easy to miss, but says something about how differently the two generations handled this. While William and Catherine were in that room negotiating specific words, Queen Elizabeth II was doing something almost the opposite. She waited. According to the book, she didn't rush to respond the night the interview aired in the United States. She held off until the following night, when the interview broadcast on ITV in Britain, and watched it herself before any statement went out in her name. Two approaches to the same crisis. One generation moving fast, negotiating language, fighting over 5 words. The other waiting, watching, taking the full picture in before committing to anything at all. Both statements ended up carrying the Queen's name. Only one of them, according to Low, carried her direct involvement in the writing. That gap between what the public assumed and what actually happened inside the palace is really the center of this story. For years, some recollections may vary, was read as the monarchy's institutional voice. Careful, measured, above the fray. Royal commentators picked it apart line by line when it was released. Critics called it dismissive. Supporters called it restrained. Almost nobody, at the time, knew that the argument for including it had come from a future queen consort pushing back against her own officials, in a room most of the public will never see footage of, over language most viewers spent maybe 4 seconds reading before moving on. The phrase itself took on a life the palace almost certainly didn't plan for. Some recollections may vary, got printed on mugs. It showed up in headlines completely unrelated to the royal family, borrowed as shorthand anytime two sides told the same story differently. Comedians used it. Columnists used it. It became one of those rare pieces of institutional language that escaped the institution entirely and turned into a cultural reference point on its own, which makes the fight over whether to include it at all feel almost impossible to imagine now. Cut that line, and there's a real chance this entire chapter of royal history reads differently. No 5-word shorthand, no mugs, just a soft statement that history might have filed away and mostly forgotten. Low's access here matters. He spent years as a royal rota reporter for the Times, and Courtiers wasn't built on rumor. It drew from sources close enough to the building to know who sat where on that sofa and what was actually said. The paperback edition added 16 new pages specifically built around this account, material that hadn't appeared in the original hardback release. Whatever this changes about how the public reads Catherine's role in that period, it wasn't rushed into print. It came later, after the initial wave of Oprah coverage had settled, when there was less pressure to publish fast and more room to get the details right. What this does, more than anything, is complicate the image a lot of people had settled on. The idea that Catherine stayed above royal conflict entirely, that she was the calm, camera-ready presence while everyone else in the family absorbed the actual friction. That image doesn't fully survive this account. It suggests someone willing to argue for specific words in a moment of real institutional pressure, someone thinking about the historical record while the interview was still fresh enough to hurt. It also raises a question that Low's reporting doesn't fully answer. If Catherine was this involved in shaping how the family responded to one crisis, how many other moments carried her influence without the public ever knowing? The insider's comment about her playing the long game suggests this wasn't a single instance, that there's a pattern here, one that mostly stays invisible by design. For now, what's confirmed is narrower and arguably more interesting because of it. A statement went out under the Queen's name in March 2021. The words that made it memorable, the 5 words that outlived the news cycle and became shorthand for the palace's entire position, were fought for by the Princess of Wales in a private argument most people will never get the full transcript of. The Queen watched the broadcast before she said anything. Catherine didn't wait. She was already in the room, making her case. Across social media, once the excerpts from Low's updated edition started circulating, one question kept coming up. Why did it take 3 years for this detail to surface at all? The original hardback of Courtiers came out in October 2022, and it covered plenty of ground on the Oprah fallout without naming Catherine as the driving force behind that specific phrase. It was only in the paperback update with those 16 new pages that this account appeared in full. Some royal watchers read that gap as evidence the source needed time and distance from the immediate crisis before they were willing to talk. Others simply noted that palace insiders rarely hand over this kind of detail while the story is still hot enough to trace back to them. There's also the matter of what didn't make it into the final statement. Early drafts, according to the insider who spoke with Low, considered language that would have called Harry and Meghan much-loved members of the family, and left it largely at that. An approach some in the building argued was the safer, more dignified route. That phrase never survived to publication in that form. Whether Catherine's push for something tougher was the reason it got cut, or whether it simply lost out in a broader rewrite, Low's sources don't say definitively. What they do agree on is the direction of travel. Softer language went out, firmer language came in, and the person most associated with wanting it that way was the future Princess of Wales. Royal commentators have been divided on how to weigh all this. Some argue it reframes Catherine's public image entirely, less the quiet, camera-ready royal content to let others handle conflict, more someone actively shaping institutional strategy behind the scenes. Others caution against reading too much into a single account, however well sourced, and point out that toughening up a family statement is a fairly ordinary instinct for anyone watching their spouse and his family get publicly accused of racism on international television. Both readings can be true at once. What isn't really in dispute at this point is that the version of events the public accepted for years, a palace speaking with one institutional voice, Elizabeth II's name attached to words Elizabeth II herself weighed in on, was incomplete. What Low's book leaves open is what happens next time. Because if this account is accurate, the family's response to any future crisis likely won't be shaped by whoever holds the crown that day. It'll be shaped by whoever's willing to sit on that sofa and argue for the right 5 words. Subscribe to Royal Archives for more on what that could mean as the monarchy moves into its next chapter.